This week on Supercars Talk, there's engineering changes at DJR and Triple Eight. Some co-drivers have been announced already for the Bathurst 1000, and I wonder whether push to pass is a good idea for supercars. In case you've been living under a rock the last couple of months, Dave Reynolds has been announced with his Penrite backing at Kelly Grove Racing. The big news of the week, actually, surprisingly, we all thought the announcement of Dave Reynolds and Penrite going there this week was going to be the big announcement. The big announcement was actually that the Grove family has invested into the Kelly Racing team. I have heard it's a 49% stake in the team, so the Kellys will still have the controlling interest. Still a bit iffy what's happening with Rick over there, whether he has fully retired, whether he's co-driving for another team, or whether he's going to do a bit of co-driving duties for his own team. All of that is still up in the air, but good news for the Kellys. You know, it's would be hard doing it on your own without that financial backing there. And also, people who are saying, oh, you know, it was good that Rick retired and that opened up a seat for Dave because Dave might not have had a seat for this year. If the Kellys had funding in place, Rick wouldn't have retired. Rick's only retired because the funding wasn't there and you had, you know, a very good driver. Had a questionable 2020, but, you know, some other people had a questionable year as well. Dave Reynolds could run for a championship if everything was in the right space, and you've got a blue chip sponsor there in Penrite wanting to come on board, so you know it was time for Rick to step aside. Interestingly, not continuing with the number 15 on that car, will be number 26, which is a Penrite started in 1926 and something about the Australia Day being on the 26th of January. Not sure how much that really counts. I would have thought they would have continued with 15, that being, you know, Rick's number forever, but maybe they want to disassociate that and get a full kind of, you know, Penrite Dave Reynolds kind of thing, you know, like Murphy always had 51 or Perkins was always 11, Brocco 5, Johnson's always, you know, he was number 17, which that has continued. But, you know, maybe they're trying to build a whole thing around the number and everything like that. Interesting on that little one there. But yeah, this decision, no surprises. And yeah, then all the people, well, why would the Kellys take on Dave Reynolds? Well, because he's got a buttload of Penrite money. It was a pretty simple decision, I think. And the look of the car, a little bit polarizing, this one. When I first looked at it, I was like, they missed the mark a little bit. When you look at it closer, last year's car in photos looked spectacular. When it was on track, it was really hard even to make out the Penrite because it was overly busy with everything shiny and things like that. Other sponsors just got totally lost. I think this year with the matte black and that, I think although it looks probably a little bit plain in the photographs, I think it's going to come up a lot better on TV. Obviously the Monster Mustang, that one there, that is a very, very, very plain livery, but looks great. And I think the Penrite's going to be somewhat similar on the Mustang with that flat look. Not quite as standout as what the Monster one is, but I think that's the idea behind it. Some more engineering changes have been announced, and this one was a little bit of a shock. David Couchy, who's been engineering Jamie Whincup for the last 6 years, I think, he's moving over and he's going to help out Shane this year. surprising. Wes McDougall, who's coming across from Matt Stone Racing, he's going to be Jamie Wincup's engineer. This shuffle, of course, happening because Grant McPherson has jumped ship to Walkinshaw Andretti United, which was announced, I think it was just before Christmas. Interesting that they've gone in that direction. Previously, it's always seemed that Jamie's got the pick of the bunch, so could Wes be better than David Cauchi? Time will tell. Maybe they're putting down, maybe it got a little bit stale, that relationship. In other announcements, Ludo is going to engineer Anton De Pasquale, and Richard Harris, who was Scott McLaughlin's engineer, is going to stay on that car with Will Davison. Ludo did take a step back a few years ago and has been an overall kind of engineering role. Will be back to race engineering this year. Is this a sign of a lower budget at Dick Johnson Racing, that there has been a bit of a shuffle, or is it just maybe, Ludo wanted to get back into race engineering? Apparently that was a bit of the driving force of him moving from Triple Eight to Penske in the first place, or DJR, because he did his little stint with Craig Lowndes and kind of enjoyed it again. That was one of the rumours. Probably a big paycheck was another reason for him to make the move. With only one seat available in the field, some co-drivers are being announced as well now, which we have seen. There's probably about half of the co-driver seats are already filled. Tim Blanchard is going to team up with Tim Slade. That's a shock. There is talk that he might be doing some Super 2 entries or some possible wildcard entries during the year to keep himself up to speed. The wildcard, that makes sense because they have got two cars ready to go. The Super 2 entry, that's a little bit of a weird one because they're probably, you can't put a Mustang out in the field there. They haven't got a Commodore or Falcon that they can use. You're going to have to drive for another team that's a totally different car and stuff. The budget to do a wild card in Supercars would have to be higher than doing kind of a wild card entry in Super 2. But for what you're learning and everything with a team like that, might you be better off doing the wild card, unless maybe you can rock up at Eggleston or something and fill an empty seat of theirs for a low amount of money at one of the rounds. Anyway, that's what he's talking about. He did that successfully a couple of years ago when he Brad Jones Racing. They ran a wild card at Wanneroo, I think it was, and he ran Super 2 in Townsville, I think it was at the time. The other co-drivers announced, which this just at Team 18, hasn't been announced which way these two are going. They've just been announced at the team. Michael Caruso is there for a 2-year deal, which, the length of deals, that's another. Dave Reynolds is a multi-year deal. He had a 10-year, he was decade Dave at Erebus, and that lasted 1 year. So these, Lee Holdsworth had a multi-year deal with Tickford as well, and that's gone to God too. And James Goulding will be back at Team 18 this year. They're really coming on leaps and bounds. They've got Richard Holloway there now engineering an overall kind of engineering. What's his name? Mr. Keed, Phil Keed. They're doing the engineering. You've got an ex-champion in Mark Winterbottom. Scott Pye's no slouch. And, Michael Caruso's great as co-driver. And James Goulding probably deserves an actual shot in the main game. Because he had a tough time. I mean, he was up against Garth Tander, which, he's going to make any rookie look average. And then the year where GRM couldn't, catch a trick, which ended up being their final year. So they're actually looking really strong for the future. Another Supercars driver is going to prop up the TCR field. Chaz is going to be driving one of the MPC Audis at the Tasmania Super Boost Challenge thing, whatever they're calling it. Um, Another Supercars driver propping up the field to get interest in the series. Bigger news though, Supercheap is going to sponsor the series for 5 years. Okay, so now this is where we insert comments about the death of Supercars because Supercheap's going to sponsor the series. Well, for the 5 year sponsorship deal, they're probably paying what they paid to sponsor Bathurst for 1 year. So, yeah, this is not going to kill Supercars. It does help TCR a bit to have a big brand like that sponsoring the series. But yeah, no one's going to retire off that sponsorship deal. And as I've said before, now like half the field is Gary Rogers Cars, who owns most of the series or something. I'm not holding my breath on TCR taking over. It is pumped up club racing really at the moment. Yeah, that's it. The Australian Grand Prix has been moved to November. That means Sandown in March is a go. Not going to be a retro round. I'm not surprised. The whole fun of the retro round, I think, was that it was kind of mid-season and it was something a little bit different, and you had the co-drivers and things like that. Yeah. They have announced, though, that they will not be doing exhibition races at the Grand Prix. The best that the Grand Prix can hope for is that COVID hits and some other round gets cancelled and they use the Grand Prix as a catch-up, fill-in round to pad out the calendar a bit more. I'm looking at you, New Zealand. That's probably the best hope that we're going to have to see Supercars at the Grand Prix this year, if the Grand Prix actually happens, because, yeah, this whole COVID thing is a bit of it's a moving target all the time. Yeah, I don't need to get into it here. But, yeah, I wouldn't be putting my house on the fact that the Grand Prix is going to happen in Melbourne this year. Supercars has come out and said that they could have a push-to-pass option in the Gen 3 car. So they're putting out the tender for different things, and part of the ECU tender is that it has to be able to have an option of having push-to-pass. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. My initial thoughts are this is a bad idea. We do not want a DRS kind of system in F1 where you just see someone go sailing past and it just takes all the skill out of a pass. They haven't specified how they want to do it, whether this is going to be part of like with the hybrid, and that's, like you get one hybrid boost per lap or whatever, and you can use that as a bit of a push to pass thing, or whether they're going to go, say, like you got a 7,000 RPM limit and you hit the button and you can go to 7,500 revs. So there's, and there's nothing about how powerful it's going to be. Will it be like do you get 20 horsepower, or do you get 100 horsepower off it, or do you get 300 horsepower or something? So it's real sketchy around the details with it. If they were going to go down this track, once again, IndyCar actually do this pretty well, where they have their push to pass button, but they get 120 seconds worth of boost for the race. So you can, at the start of the race, you can hit the button and take off and hold it on for, you're not going to hold it on for the first 20 seconds or whatever, but hold it on for the first straight or whatever. But, you could use 20 seconds in the first lap and then you've only got 100 seconds for the rest of the race. Or you can not use it all the way through and then, the last 10 laps you can, button kind of thing. And you also, it's not just a part, you get to choose when you use it. So you can kind of, you can't tell that the guy behind you's pushed it, but he could be really close, and you're like, hey, he's going to push the button down this straight, I'll get on my button kind of thing and use it as a defensive thing. Or, you want to do a fast lap because they actually do the right thing when the safety car comes out and, shut the pits. Not going to get it. We're talking about push to pass here, but you could, blaze back to the pits holding the button down to get back to the pits faster, so you don't have to double stack or debris or anything. So my initial thoughts is, no, we don't need this in the category. I'd prefer to see less downforce to make it easier to pass. If we are going to go down this kind of track, I would like to maybe see it if it was part of the hybrid system, so that you kind of, at least there's a reason to have hybrid there, that you go, oh yeah, the battery thing or whatever is your push to pass, and you can get on the button. And there's none of this like F1 where we've got 17 million rules about where you've got to be within 1 second of the car and you can only push it in this area of the track and all that kind. I used to love when the DRS was open slather in qualifying, and the Red Bull cars are making ridiculous downforce and they're just holding it like flat open around corners and things like that, where other cars have got no chance of doing it. And I remember playing like the F1 game back in those days, and you get in a Red Bull and you'd blast through corners with the DRS wide open, and you'd jump in like a Williams, say, and you'd go to turn into the corner and woof, off you'd go, because there'd just be no downforce with the DRS open. But I'd like that, if we are going to go down that track, let's have some freedom on it. Like, you might be able to use it X amount of times per race, or you can use it each lap, or some kind of limit like that. But you can use it whenever you want. You don't have to just use it on the main straight between these points. Give them a bit of freedom with it. But first things first, get rid of the downforce, make it easier for the cars to pass. Simple. Then we don't need any gimmicks. So anyway, down in the comments, tell me what you think. That's it for this week. I have talked for quite a while, although I have had some comments about people want longer episodes. So that's obviously, some people do like listening to my voice. Anyway, I'm still Dave. This is Supercars Talk, and I'll catch you later.